Hi, I'm Dave Baszucki, founder and CEO at Roblox, and today you're listening and watching Tech Talks. Today we are joined by Arvind KC, Chief People and Systems Officer at Roblox, and Shobz Ahluwalia, Chief Information Officer at Roblox. We are going to be talking about culture of innovation, people and systems, and both the tech that forms the platform for how we work with our people system operating system, but also the human element that sits on top of it and our values and mission and how that comes together to drive a culture of innovation. Casey, great to be here. Shobz, great to be here. Thanks for joining me. This is kind of unorthodox, isn't it? We don't have a CHRO. We have a people and systems officer. Like, what's up with that, Casey? Can you share a bit about your background and how we came together?
Yeah, no, of course. First, great to be here, Dave.
Yeah.
And you're right. My background has always been in engineering and building products. And usually, what we find is excellence happens in the convergence of two things. And one convergence that both of us were drawn to as we're talking about this is the convergence of technology and building the right organization. And that's what led to the genesis of this role of people and systems. So it's not about just thinking about how do we build our people and our organization, but how do we make it last so that it's not dependent on the people who are crafting it, and it constantly evolves. And systems is the part of that equation, which is usually missing in these roles.
Well, when we think about your role and complemented with Shobz, we have all the traditional HR functions. We have HR, we have recruiting, we have compensation, we have talent, we have information, we have systems. You have a little bit of an unorthodox past for that role, right? Because you came through, I believe, a Facebook trajectory, a Palantir trajectory, a Google trajectory, not as a CHRO, but much more as a systems person.
That's exactly right. In fact, prior to Facebook, I was building supply chain solutions. And it's at Facebook that I first started building products for the people space.
Yeah.
And what I learned over there is that when I was doing that, of building products for making better leaders and better managers, I got better in my own craft of being a good leader and manager. So that was my initial foray. It continued in Palantir, where for a while, in addition to the CIO and CISO roles, I was acting as a CHRO, but that was a brief stint. And then it continued in a slightly different way in Google, where we had to reimagine how people and teams come together and how can you bring back the impact at scale that Google had. So while I've never had the traditional CHRO role, all of this was a build-up to what I have at Roblox now.
Yeah, well, it was amazing that we found you. And when we did this search, we intentionally were looking for, could we find someone that combines systems thinking, building people infrastructure with the empathy to be a people leader? And like, it's a miracle we found you. And then combining that systems vision and really unifying the CIO into this people and systems role. Shobz, you just recently joined us as well, right? And you've also had a long history of working on information architecture, kind of the things that are going to drive the systems. Can you just share a little about where you were before Roblox?
Sure. So again, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. I have been working in systems and technology for 3 decades almost now. And I'm a computer engineer by education and trade. I used to write C-level device driver programs a very long time ago.
We talked about that when we interviewed. I got really excited about that.
We talked about those big Motorola switches and paging when it used to be technology.
That's pretty hardcore writing device drivers.
That's right.
I like that.
It was great. But like over time, then I worked in the telecom industry to begin with, but I moved on to working to internal systems a long time ago, which started with the ERP systems, but really I began to find holes in internal systems and begin to develop systems by itself too, which was interesting.
And then you, I looked through the places you'd worked, and it's a little bit of a really who's who interesting, right? So we've got, I think you've been at Uber, you've been at Peloton, You've been at Rocket Fuel in advertising. So you've seen a lot of different type cultures as you've been building information tech.
That's right, yeah. My previous 4 roles, including this one, I was the first CIO in the organization. They didn't have like that
Yep.
role before, and the charter was to create systems that can help amplify the internal processes.
That's right.
You know, how do you make them simple, elegant, and extremely valuable, so that they're there to make the company just work way more efficiently.
Yeah, it's almost in this area of people and systems. There's other areas where we have traditional products like CRM systems or things that keep the human element alive but offload a lot of what we do in humans. And the people systems running the company role, it's a little unique. And so we have this vision of some of this we're going to have to build ourselves also. So this is somewhat unique role, Casey, on people systems and integrating this. Can you share just a little about the vision of like what we're trying to do here?
Yeah. So when you think about any company, there are 3 things that a company has to do, right? They have to build the product, they have to build the business, and then they have to build people or build the organization. So I think of like at the highest level, my role is to start with building the people and the organization charter.
And we sometimes say that's the primary product
That's
of the
right.
company. Everything else sits on top of people and how we find them and mentor them and support their career.
That's exactly right. And I think I still remember one of the discussions we had where we both converged on, like, if you really build the people, the rest of the things will take care of themselves.
That's right.
And that's the goal that we want to achieve. And what Roblox has been exceptional at is building the right flywheels. We have built a creator flywheel, we have built a user flywheel. And now when I think about the people and systems role, it is to build the people and the organization flywheel. What does it mean? It means, if you decompose it, it is how do we continue to hire the best talent? How do you continue to ensure that the managers and leaders we have are focused on building the right product, the right people, the right business? How do we ensure that groups and teams work really well together? How do we ensure that even as we grow in size, we are able to get things done with urgency and impact with the long view?
That's right.
And how do you ensure that we have just the right friction in the company? Right?
That's
Most
right.
of the things are seamless. Like, these are some aspects of what contributes to building the long-term vision of a very sustaining ecosystem.
There's one other bullet you didn't mention that I really like as part of this vision, and it's almost an evolutionary self-pruning bullet in systems around not getting too bloated. Can you just add that final bullet of, I don't know, do we call it bureaucracy busting, or how do you mention that?
That's right. We call it bureaucracy busting or just removing friction. Is that the idea is that we want to make almost everything really easy.
That's
and be
right.
very deliberate about where we're introducing friction, because that friction is right. Everything else should be super easy.
Yeah, because typically as organizations grow, or whether it's an organization or a legal system or a state government, it's very easy to add things.
Right.
It's so difficult to remove things.
right.
And I've been really impressed that we have people sending things to you around systems that we actually want to remove or scale down rather than build up at Roblox.
That's right. I'm a big believer of subtractive design.
Ooh, I've never heard that term.
Yeah, it is the notion that, I mean, if you just think about an analogy of fitness, you want to stop doing a set of things before you figure out what to do.
Okay.
When there's too much noise in the system, you want to subtract before you add.
Okay, I'm going to use that term. And then, so now we have a high level, there's a vision, and then we have this amazing partner. I think at Roblox, we might almost think as CIO, as being CIO plus, right? Because in a sense, some of these systems we want to talk about to streamline things get to be created by you. So
That's
could you
right.
share a little bit of the CIO vision at Roblox?
So the vision here is to create frictionless experiences for our employees and builders so that they can be supercharged in productivity. And we look at it end to end, from, let's say, hire to retire, end-to-end journey. And I look at it at both as process simplification and then adding systems on top of it. So building on what Casey was saying, the first step is how to have the best process.
Yeah.
And as an example for bureaucracy busting, we can look at do we have too many approvals or too much friction that is not best. But then create those systems that can be so beautiful and well aligned and just at the right time So that, and a lot of technologies help with that today.
Okay, so we're gonna dive in and frame, like, some of the people who are watching this who might not work in a tech company are saying, what are all these systems? What are we talking about? And so I'm gonna highlight a little bit of things around A, how we run the company, and then B, we'll talk very briefly about some of the systems, and then we'll get into it. So first, one of the things I think we've always been talking about for a long time at Roblox is this notion of how do we structure the company. And internally, we, in effect, run the company. We try to as a set of smaller companies that have as much autonomy as possible, but at the same time come together at various levels. In our executive meeting, we have representatives of the 8 or 9 what we would call companies, and we work on all the horizontal connection, but try to see that autonomy. Can you share a little about this? This is almost like the design of the groups, teams, and pods in the company.
That's right. So it starts with, at the lowest unit, what is a unit where we will get tangible work done without a lot of coordination headwinds? And that tends to be the 2 pizza rule of something that is about a dozen or so people who can be focused on a mission and get something done. And that's the team, that's the pods.
Yep.
A construct about that is the teams, and a construct about that is a group, and a construct about that is the company.
That's right.
So when we look at it recursively, we set goals at the company level, which are shared across different groups. And then the groups take them and then convert them to their group-specific objectives. And we think of each of these groups as having their own mini CEOs.
Yep.
And they cascade the same principles to teams, who cascade the same principle to pods. As engineers, we love recursion, so we believe
Can you share for people out there what recursion means?
it is the same thing being repeated, being done at like multiple levels. So
That's
the
right.
idea that there is a set of routines that we would do at a company level, and the right subset of it just gets cascaded down, and you can examine any part of the company, and things happen in a very similar way. And that, what does it help with? More than the concept, what it really helps with is it makes sure that the communication horizontally and vertically is really fast and seamless. And that's
Yep.
kind of what we're trying to achieve is, as we realize our ambitions and become a very big company, we don't want to lose the spirit of being a small company. And that's really what like recursion enables.
Yeah, and so the recursion is really interesting to me because we can try to exercise in literally our executive C-suite meetings similar patterns that are happening way down on a up and coming leader at what would be a pod level with 10 types of peoples. And one of the exciting things I think when we think about systems design is, and we'll start getting into that, when we build systems, we're actually talking about the dashboard for the executive team having some connection with the dashboard for a small team as well. So really excited about that. And then the other things as people think about the nitty gritty of what we're trying to build, there's when we think of the life cycle of a company, like you said, hire to retire, there's systems around recruiting people. There are systems around providing feedback. There are systems that we do as far as twice a year. Can you share just some of the, when you think about a company, the actual things that we have to build
yeah.
on top of that?
Absolutely. So we're, in principle, a best-of-breed company. So
Yeah.
we're not building everything on one platform. We have Greenhouse for recruiting. We use Workday for core HR work and advanced comm. We have several other systems when you look through the hire-to-retire framework. I think where we are unique and especially thoughtful is what do we want to build so it fits us so well so that it actually shapes our culture. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very mature way of looking at it, and that's a very thoughtful way of looking at it. In this example, while we use, first of all, we connect all of those systems, but while we use Workday for several things, we have our own homegrown system, Rogrow, which we use for performance management.
That's right.
While the performance management process in the industry might not be the best liked process, the system that we have is actually well regarded in the company because we try to make it so unique to us. It follows our principles and our culture, and we try to make it lightweight on everybody involved.
And so there's this super cool notion of what we're building in people systems where we are running Greenhouse, we're running Workday, we're running a bunch of other products. but when I right now go to our Roblox people system, technically, I hit this website that says Roblox operating system, and I never see those products. Can you share a bit how is it that I never see those products when I'm using the Roblox operating system?
Because we are able to skin the systems behind the scenes, and
That's
we're able
right.
to extract the right information and present it to the user.
Yeah.
The how should not be as apparent to our builders,
That's right.
but the why and the what, the information should be there in a consumable way for them and right at their fingertips. And that's what we strive to do. There's data lakes behind the scene where we are looking at systems and we are trying to get intelligence from systems, and actually even trying to we've got a PSA team. Usually you don't have that, as many companies don't have that as part of the systems and people team.
That's right.
And they create this wonderful analysis of data. We convert it from zeros and ones, bits and bytes, to good visualized data, and then to real intelligence.
Yeah, so for everyone out there, when I'm using our Roblox operating system, technically, in addition to our vision, mission, and values, I can see all of the people in the company, the reporting relationships. I can also see the groups, teams, and pod type relationships, which is fantastic. It's fully transparent within the company. Managers also have access to a lot of analytics on top of that. Can you share a bit on the people science and analytics part that comes together under Roblox?
Yeah, I think that's actually a significant differentiator for us. For the percentage of our team which is focused on rich research and analytics is a significant number. And we do that primarily with the philosophy that all our decisions around people and organization building need to be educated with data. Right? It starts with hiring, where I think we have some of the most unique hiring processes. And if I think about what's our aspiration for hiring, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to apply to work at Roblox, and they are assessed the same without any bias.
That's right.
And the way we've been able to do it is actually through these game-based assessment, which we have done for Early Career Group. And I know, Dave, you are a big part of the vision over there, with the strategic acquisition of Embellis, which is deeply integrated into a whole bunch of workflows within Roblox. So we measure more than many companies have seen. We share all of that transparently. We do a lot of research on how best to assess. And I'm really excited on the quality of assessment tests we have and the reduction in bias that we have done.
Right. So this is a great zero in, I would say, within the fabric of our people system, Roblox operating system, new college grad hiring, we could almost think of that as one component of this. So much passion here, right? We acquired a company called Embellis. They're experts in assessment. We did a lot of scientific research around what has been successful for our current employees. We literally, when you say game-based assessment, can you share a little bit more around what that is?
Oh yeah, of course. Actually, most people can go to the Roblox Career Center and try the test version, which is Kaiju Cats.
Yeah.
But all of our interns and new college grads, all of them go through an assessment where they actually play a couple of games. One is called Factories, another is called Robots. And each of these, you go through a set of tasks, and the output of which will give us a really good signal on whether they have the right ingredients for working at Roblox. And again, what we've seen is the number of colleges we reach is so huge, and hence we can cast our net really wide in terms of representation.
Well, I recently made a tweet where traditionally 5 or 10 years ago, people would think about college brand when they look at resumes and say, oh, this candidate is from this college. Can you share why we stopped doing that?
Yeah, it's because there are gems everywhere, and it's a very incorrect filter.
That's right.
And what we want to do is instead be much more scientific about an individual's capabilities as we assess them. And by having an assessment which can be infinitely scaled, theoretically we can reach anybody. Our ability to top of funnel, the number of people who can take assessment is close to the college population that we have.
That's right. So the message, I think, to a new college grad looking at Roblox, is as fairly as possible, we're going to try to assess whether you're a fit to Roblox. And because the numbers are so big, it's very difficult right now to get that job at Roblox. But I guess the message would be, we think we're doing this as fairly as possible. If you've gone to a community college, you've got the exact same chances as an Ivy League grad.
At least at the top of the funnel, we are able to process everyone who's interested.
That's right, which is wonderful. So going to go back to some of the technical building of some of these components. And, as we're scaling, there's some values we would use around building these products at Roblox. And I know you're thinking about it because when we start building products, we have issues around user interface. We have issues around how usable is it? Can I use it on mobile? Can you share some of the gritty things we use when we're building our Roblox operating system?
Well, the first things we think about is what's most valuable. And there is a lot of data and research into that. We look at user stories and outcomes, and we want to understand what is the right thing to build and how we want to build it so our people use it the best. We work very closely with the design organization, both for UXR and UX design for that, so that it's easy to consume.
Which is really cool, right? We're trying to build, once again, when we think of all of these companies working at Roblox, the 8 or 9 of them that we would call a group, whenever we draw that diagram, we put people and systems as this foundational layer, even lower, more foundational than our infra platform group, because you build these systems, you have designers to make them usable, and then all these other groups sit on top of it. So design is actually important. What else is important?
Scalable architecture is very important. So we look at what are the bets, how are we creating an architecture so that whether we are at 3,000 or 30,000, it can scale well. How are we monitoring?
I think this is sorry for interrupting. This is a really good point, and we've talked about this before. Most companies, when they're at 3,000, are not using that term recursive, or are not using, can we build something for 3,000 that would work at 30,000 or 300,000? We're literally thinking about that, which is pretty cool and amazing, because some of these systems designed for 3,000, when you get to 30,000, create dystopian results.
That's exactly right.
As opposed to the right results.
Exactly, yeah. So we want to grow horizontally as well as vertically, and we want it to be scalable in both directions. And we think about it when we're designing a system, which is key. And again, we look at it both from process and systems design purview.
Very nice. So another system we do, and we talk a lot about this, is our twice-a-year system we call RowGrow, which is where managers meet with employees, we help with career, we calibrate, we do all of that. Could you maybe share, Casey, a little about what's traditionally done in the industry, and then where we could see this going, and maybe put the lens of bureaucracy busting on top of it, because we want to be spending the most appropriate amount of time, and at the same time, the least amount of time on this at the same time.
Yeah, so I think in some extent, the innovation in this space is ahead of us. What we have done is optimize for fairness and consistency so far. And we have a process which is a process that is where we look for alignment with values predominantly, but it is still, in all honesty, it is not as leading from an industry perspective as where we are from hiring. And what we have talked about is how do we reach this notion of continuous feedback and continuous checkpoints and continuous calibration, right? And if we do that, the cyclical processes that we have are currently our stopgap and a hack.
I like that. I like the notion of saying what we have right now is just a short-term solution to where we want to go.
That's exactly right.
And so let's imagine a future world that's working like both of you would like to do that. What changes? Do I once every 6 months write a bunch of stuff up and get together with my manager and they write stuff up? Or what's the difference between that and maybe a future vision?
If I can jump in, I would just say there is no points in time when this happens.
Okay.
So performance management and performance conversations just happen naturally as part of a manager-employee relationship,
Right.
where we are all focused on making sure that our builders are always growing and always learning. So there is no touch point ever anywhere during the year when the time is right, when the signals are right, when the employee has come to that level, but they are producing so well and they are so aligned with our values that a conversation about, hey, maybe let's take you to the next level can happen. It just happens at that point.
That, right. There may be, I wonder if there will be a time in 10 or 20 years when we look back at performance management and these types of systems. Because I'm old enough to remember prior software eras where once every 6 months we would print this thing called a CD-ROM. There'd be a lot of process to get all the QA right, get it all right. Then twice a year out it goes. Up comes the web, up comes things like Roblox, where we ship literally several times an hour. Hundreds of teams are shipping, and all of a sudden it's so much more iterative, so much more fast, and there never is the notion of this big 6-month checkpoint. I'm wondering if what we're working on ultimately will just become the norm, and it'll seem somewhat weird to do these big 6-month type things.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Anything that is hard, you want to do it small and often. That's the idea of how software evolved in the way you talked about, and continuous integration coming in. And we're going to do that for continuous performance, right? Promotions don't need to wait for a milestone.
That's right.
Right? Higher compensation doesn't need to wait for a milestone. Feedback doesn't need to wait for a milestone. All of them should happen continuously. And that's the evolution through both technology and processes that we're after.
And we get bureaucracy busting for free because
That's right.
there's no longer this 1 week every 6 months.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so this is almost one of the most concise ways we've talked about the vision of where we want to go on this. Thinking about the people and systems and initiatives around living out our vision on people and systems, any we want to touch on high level? Like one is brainstorming ideation as a start. I know there's others. Any you want to touch base on around that?
I've been spending a lot of time on just Gen AI.
Yep.
And thinking about how does that change the space, right?
Yep.
And the impact of Gen AI on consumer tech has been pretty obvious, right? It unleashes creators. On enterprise tech has been less obvious because you don't want it, for example, to hallucinate a bunch of answers and give you legal advice, which are a bunch of hallucinations. So what is important, but however, I don't think you can ignore the trend that is happening.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of how do we create capacity for rapid experimentation, and how do we ensure that the things that we build as LLM apps can be brought to people where work is already happening and that they don't have to change context for it. Right?
Yep.
So one example of that is we've been working with other companies where you can do a bunch of things in Slack and you can have the engine reason and spawn different agents. But we're also in the process of leveraging our own internal LLM as a service to stand up like an architecture for how do we build a platform for building LLM apps. I can keep going on this for a bit, so let me pause here.
Well, it's interesting on LLM as a service to think about the future of Roblox around this. There's a parallel thread where what we're building in our infrastructure team has to be used in possibly 3 ways. One is we probably have 100 AI stacks running in the company right now. We more and more are building these our own and running these on our own infra. More and more the creators on Roblox want access to these same stacks, and so we have to build a way so that ultimately millions of people at the same time could be using real-time inference to do that. It's fun to think about the people and systems team tapping into that
That's exactly right.
same infrastructure, so you have inference on core LLMs that could ultimately be trained on some of our own data.
Yeah, and I mean, a very simple example is we have taken safety and civility as our first order primitives, and we have exceptional capability in Roblox as a product for ensuring that safe and civil conversations happen.
Right.
When we are a 100,000 company, we want to have that also be real time within conversations that happen within the company, right? So the same set of technologies are applicable there.
There's another culture around measurement and how we measure internally. Shobz, I know you've thought about that a lot. Any thoughts on that area?
Oh, absolutely. So at the highest level, when we talk about our objectives, we always have KRs and metrics aligned to them. And more, we see conversations starting with metrics. In other places I've seen, sometimes you end with it, but here we start with it and we see how we're moving.
Yeah.
That culture of measurement is deeper than a system or a process. It's just ingrained in our people now because we make it so easy for them to always see and understand what their metrics are. And that helps us define decisions instead of justify decisions.
That's right. So if I'm a leader at Roblox or an individual, like a technical leader or whatever, when I go to our Roblox OS once again, there's an amazing amount of data available for me. What's going on in the team, what's going on in the product, that type of thing. So just for people out there, this is also built into Roblox OS. And so in addition to finding people and groups and what they're working on, there's an amazing amount of stuff to look up as well.
That is. And there is also more to do. I think we are early in the journey. There is way more to do over there too, which we have a great roadmap and plan on.
Okay, so piggybacking on that around tracking and OKRs, some of these metrics we share with the company as well. We want to be very transparent. Can you share some of the measurement we do and some of what we're sharing with the company as part of the people and systems team?
Yeah, so we have a few company level KRs that and metrics. One is from a hiring standpoint, we actually don't look at the number of hires to target. We look at it at a group level, but at the company level, we are focused on what's the candidate satisfaction. Because we just think, and everybody who comes to Roblox, irrespective of whether they get hired or not, should have an exceptional experience. So that's the company level metric that all of us are accountable to.
There's a funny story about this because you said we don't necessarily look at the metrics. I don't know if I shared it with you, but literally there was a time when Roblox had 8 or 10 people, and I remember sitting around a table with all of the constituents, and I think we had a very small hiring target of some number of people, and we were missing that target because we had been leaning in on finding the right people for Roblox and being very thoughtful in who's aligned with the values of the company and all of that. And we had a really pivotal discussion going around the table where there were people around that table who said, well, if we're missing the targets, we should change the way we do this so we can hit the targets. And then a lot of other people, me included, said, no, you know what, we will just miss targets. It's okay to do that. So you triggered a good memory when you said that similar thing for us.
And for clarity, the team is hitting the targets. It is more about our focus is candidate satisfaction. That's a great story that catches.
It's fun for the team to hit recruiting targets and know they have the freedom to focus on the candidates rather than adjusting anything to hit a target.
That's right. We also, on the spirit of metrics, we closely look at our engagement scores. We look at a set of metrics around diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We look at things like manager favorability scores. So we have a whole host of metrics. We promote a subset of them to top-level metrics.
Okay, super good. And then there's another thing called the NIST framework, N-I-S-T. Who knows about that one? Because I got the note that we should share a little about that.
Well, that's a security framework that gets used in the industry. It's pretty well respected, and our security organization looks at it. It is a lagging indicator because we look at it, it gets measured at a particular time, year over year, but it defines or it quantifies how well a company can do on 5 basic vectors that security looks at. And it defines the maturity of the company in terms of how well we can assess and defend any security issues that may come up.
Okay, awesome. And for those of you that are out there listening, I think if you hop back 1 month, you'll see a podcast with Brooks, who's our chief security officer, where we dived into this a bit and shared some fun anecdotes about how focused we are on this as well. So here's another interesting thing to think about. We're very aware of what's the ratio in the company of people building product versus all of the people that surround them. And we track what percent of the company is engineering and product and design and other things versus how much are people like us, supporting that, either in people systems, marketing, legal, whatever. With we have, I believe, a remarkably high percentage of people building stuff. When I share with other CEOs the percentage of people creating, they go, "Oh my gosh, how do you manage that way?" And it's working really well. But is there anything about that makes the role unique, or in building people systems here?
Yeah, few things. One is, you're right. The percentage that we have at Roblox of core eng prod is much higher than what I've seen in other tech companies. And what it does for us is it always creates the need to make sure that the support functions are highly automated and capable. Right?
Yeah.
So we have to keep them thin and have them scale sublinearly with the rest of the company. And the second thing it does is it puts the mindset of everyone's a builder in the company, right? Another aspect of this.
And can you share the genesis of that term builder and why it's so critical?
Yeah.
A bit.
Sure. We were thinking about what's the right term for referring to our people, and we experimented with things like Robloxians. Usually there is some suffix that is added to the word Roblox, and you call
That's
it a
right.
day. But that doesn't capture the spirit of what we are actually here to do, right? And the way we think about it is, we are a group of a group of people in the background enabling the entire world to be very creative, right? And so we think about the people in the background who are helping the world be creative. They're actually building something. They're building the platform, you're building the business, or building people. So
That's
the
right.
common verb for all of us is build, and hence we chose to call ourselves builders.
Yeah, and it's an interesting coincidence that when there were 4 of us in an office making the first Roblox, we were all interacting with the first 100 people on Roblox every day, but coincidentally, my first username was Builderman. And so when you thought of the notion of coming full circle to We Are Builders, there's a connection to that early character we created. There's also an interesting connection in that, Shobz, you get involved in writing code, or, you're building people hiring systems, but we really wanted to highlight that everyone here is building Roblox, and that could be a financial analyst, that could be someone in our facilities team who is organizing this great space. So I love the notion that we're all building, not just the people, the engineers,
That's right.
and technical people here. And so now that we have builders, another area to just think about would be, what does a builder, when we think about hiring and we think about hiring builders, we talked about Rogro. Is there anything on your mind, Casey, around the hiring process as we would interact with a future builder, from first contact, how they would go through our process that you think is unique in a way?
Yeah, so that we do look for people who are aligned with our values, and our values in short are like, take the long view, get things done, be responsible and respect the community. So in this, when you think about get things done, often that manifests in how the impact that people have had. So
That's
as
right.
we test for how people have lived their values through their past experience, that automatically becomes a filter for figuring out who are people who are here to have an impact, who are not here to run a process or be part of a cog in a wheel, but they're really here to take on some responsibility, build things, and just have fun in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're talking today about a culture of innovation, and there's an interesting symmetry of our values in that when we say take the long view, that connects with innovation. We have to have a vision of where we're going to go in 1 or 2 years. So our internal code word for take the long view is innovation.
Right.
Get stuff done. We think about iteration and shipping code every day and whatever. And there's a notion that if each of those exists on their own, weird things can happen. Getting stuff done every day without a vision means you may be getting stuff done in a weird direction. Taking the long view without getting stuff done on the way means those traditional 2-year mega projects
You're a
that,
university.
Yeah.
that then drop 2 years later and it's already too late for the market. So there's an intersection of those, which is really interesting. And then the other two, we are responsible, in a sense, moves to more this notion of what we're trying to build, how we run the business. We're trying to have leaders at the pod, team, and group level who are future CEOs who are responsible for running that. And then, of course, respecting the community about putting our community before the company. So there's a lovely symmetry around putting all of these things together. It's funny because as we talk about these values, and we've been talking about a lot of technical stuff, it's worth coming back to some of the soft stuff we do as well, around transparency, because there's transparency not just in the systems, but what we do every week, for example. And so, Shobz, can you share just every week Friday at 9:00 what happens at Roblox?
Absolutely, especially since my team support that event. So we have a weekly AMA with you, Dave, where the entire company is invited. And we share the progress very transparently on different areas or different interesting things happening. But there's also the Ask Me Anything, or the AMA part of it, where I think your guidance is the grittier, the better kind of questions. But we encourage all of our builders to be able to ask what is on their mind. And sometimes it's not even questions, it's also thoughts or what they're thinking of where the company might go.
Yeah. What I have experienced with moving to weekly full open mic is we've actually built a little bit of a muscle up where the employees feel comfortable asking what's really on your mind, not what we think is on your mind, and having not just me but members of the C-suite ask that.
I mean, that part is definitely very valuable. We also share a whole amount of information by group every week. I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, and so updating every group, what's going on. So if we have the 8 or 9 groups, they're cycling through, sharing what's up, opening the mic to questions, and I think then moving to more and more transparency as well.
And I think it is also recursive in nature, because while it starts from you, Dave, there's also other leaders who do that, and that is just at different levels of the organization. You see these AMAs. I know Casey does it with our group, and I see different groups doing something similar. And it creates that culture of, if I have a question, I know I have a place to ask it.
Yeah.
It also creates the culture. We also have the other culture of, if we have a question now and an AMA is not scheduled for the next 2 weeks, we don't have to wait for it. Skip-level conversations are encouraged. Anybody in the organization can reach out to anyone above or sideways in the chain and say, hey, let's chat about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good, what you mentioned there around leading by example is arguably one of the best ways to share values in the company. Your values can be written, they can be on your company website, but we have to
Live it.
We have to live it so people can see that example, and that's the real way to live out our values.
100%. I mean, people will pay much more attention to what we do than what we say.
So I think that's a wonderful way to wrap this up, because we've gone from really a much more technical thing back to our values, and I feel almost what we're doing here is, where appropriate, trying to encapsulate our values in systems that make it easier for the human part to sit on top of it, which is really lovely. So in a sense, we're building people systems to make people really a bigger part of everything.
That's right. Systems with a heart.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're building systems with a heart, and with that, I'd like to thank Shobz and Arvind for just a wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dave. It was great chatting with you.